Ah, push him up at the swing the musica. Ooh-wah, 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 ooh-wah.
Oh, that was very nice. Come on up here now. Here's your money. Come on, take it. Don't be bashful. Come on. That's it. Oh, that's good.
Muchas gracias. Thank you too much.
You're a cute little fellow. Say, I've got somebody I want you to meet. Oh, Pudgy. Come here, Pudgy. Come here. We have a guest. See? Isn't he cute? Come on over here. Little chittermunk. Go ahead now. Don't be backward. Go play, that's it. There's nothing to be afraid of. You play around and maybe he'll show you some tricks. Huh? That's it. You play nice now, because I have to go out. And when I come back, I may have a surprise for you, if you're good. Huh? Oh, Mr. Organ Man! Now look, Joe, I'll give you $2.
Mamma mia, how many times I have to tell you it's a tree box, a tree?
Hey, Leo, Ryan, and Neil. Easy cute, what up? Duck Dog, I see you out there. Sarah, greetings, welcome aboard. Madness, what up?
It's a tree box, it's a tree box.
Can y'all hear me at all? What up, cyberspace cadets, cyber fanbots everywhere? It's Wednesday night. Holy fuck, what's going on? All right, what are you doing? No, you can't stream on a Wednesday. That's right, I can. It's time for XD, a special edition, and we're going to scoot out of this room. I just want to make sure I said hey to everybody before we got going and lit my little thing up here. Hey, it's me. And we're going to move into the main room where everybody is. Tonight we have a special guest, the one and only Deb FILLMAN joins us. Whoa. Now they'll say something.
Oh shit! Seriously?
That was. All right, you've been boomered by irate. Sorry, Mr. FILLMAN.
What happened?
I
forgot to unmute stuff.
I had y'all muted still.
Okay, well, now that I'm unmuted, what I said while I was muted was there are probably people in the audience going, "Thank God she's the one and only." Like there's not more than one of her. I think there's some school administrators out there who feel that way anyway.
Well, maybe our audience. They're probably like, "I wish everybody was like you."
There's an entire school board on the Central Coast of California right now that probably still wish harm upon me. I have a fallow field. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know the feeling. It's a place I have resided for a very long time. Where I'm that one going. Anyone notice the Emperor's naked? Like naked? Like anyone else see that? Am I the only one?
Buck naked. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and it's been like my whole life. Every job I've ever had, you know, and then about the school stuff. My kids were in school. Same story.
Yeah. No, my oldest is Aspie, and she was on a standard IEP from first grade until I pulled her in from 7th grade, and I thought it would get better when we went to Texas, and it didn't. Just different types of poor treatment and discrimination and laziness and things like that. We went from teachers locking her in bathrooms when she was having meltdowns and not reporting it to me, and me asking where the bruises were coming from and nobody telling me, to hordes of girls racially profiling and attacking my child at the middle school and the school covering it up. So
wow.
Yeah, and trying to force her to get along with the kids that were attacking her. Like she was the problem and she needed to learn how to get along with them. But she's the one that can't read the social situation, so she had no clue what she was doing wrong. And at that point I was like, okay, I'm done. And I pulled her out, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find out till after my kids were pulled out that my two eldest were Aspie, and that explained a lot about what was going on in the school. But nobody really cared about the problems they were having, and and no matter how much we complained about the bullying, it was in one case with my middle daughter when she was in, I think it was 4th grade. I knew who the bully was. I'd seen her do it in myself because I was volunteering in the school, and I went to the principal and the vice principal, and both of them were black, and the student bullying my daughter was black, and that was irrelevant to me. It was just she was being bullied. But the only reason I mention it is that when they heard the story and my daughter was in the room with me, they said, well, we can't really do anything about it. There are some cultural issues. And I said, and they didn't say we can't really do anything. I said, well, we've spoken to the parents, but that's all we can do. And I said, there's got to be more you can do. You can't just allow this to continue. It isn't working. Whatever you've tried, it isn't working.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse. And they said, well, there are some cultural issues. I said, what do you mean by cultural issues? You're going to have to explain that to me. And they literally didn't answer me. And they turned to my daughter, 4th grader, and said, what would you like to be different? How would you? And she says, I want it to stop. Why would...
Yeah.
Like my mom just told you, why are you ignoring my mom? And she said, I want it to stop. And they said, well, we can move your seat in the classroom. And my daughter's like, I'm sorry, what? So they moved her seat as far away from this girl as possible, which only made it worse because now she had to walk past her to get to her desk. Before, her desk was before hers, but it was closer.
Yeah, so now she could get smacked every time she has to go to the front of the classroom.
She'd stick her leg out. She'd walk by, she'd try to trip her, She made fun of her name. She called her all kinds of names. She'd yell down the hall goofy names at her. And just mock her mercilessly. And I even talked to the teacher and I said, what's going on? You know, can't you do anything? She's like, well, you know, we've just tried everything. I'm like, obviously not, because they're still in the same class and the kid doesn't appear to be remotely scared of anything happening to her. I mean, I saw her.
Yeah.
After you allegedly disciplined her, I saw her take my daughter. They were lining up to get to the water fountain. And I'm waiting in the hallway because I'm volunteering and I'm on my way to meet a student. And her class came out. My daughter kind of, you know, does a little hi mom wave thing. And she goes up for her turn at the water fountain and all that, because this girl comes up, grabs my daughter and just with her hip, like shoves her like this, like my turn. And like, you know, so she hit her face on the metal thing of the water fountain. And you know how it's like got this round thing and it kind of like dug into her face, and she pulls back and she's got this mark. And I literally went up to this girl and I said, excuse me. And I said, step aside. I'm like, it's her turn. She's still using it. You don't lay hands on somebody. She didn't know I was your mom, but I was like, you don't lay hands on somebody. And she's like, looks at me and she's like, this girl was huge. I'm about 5'1" easily 5'8", this kid, 4th grade. Humongous. So I wonder if they were like physically intimidated, but apparently the dad was like 7 feet tall. Like, I mean, we're talking a big family. Maybe they were literally physically intimidated. I have no idea, but they wouldn't go near this kid. And this kid used her size and she used her strength to just shove people around, like out of her way. Like, I want water, get away from me. Apparently she did the same thing in the bathroom. Yep. If you were in front of the line for bathrooms, she just shoved you out of the way.
She'd have hated me.
They just didn't care.
Yeah, this reminds me of a quote from Michael Malice, which I was talking to you about earlier, where he says, public schools are literal prisons for children, and the only time many people will ever encounter physical violence in their life.
Yes.
That is true.
Yes.
That is true.
Yes.
It's the only time I experienced, thinking on it, it's the only time I have personally experienced physical violence was in middle school myself. Because I'm so small, I was bullied by a big girl, and I think the difference is that my dad taught me to fight back. He said, anybody touches you, you have my permission to fight back with all you've got. I don't care what you do to them, I will back you. You know, if somebody touches you, I will back you. So this girl was messing with me and she started stepping on my feet and shoving me, and she would like actually stand on the front of my feet so I couldn't get away, and she would just, you know, smack me. And one day she did that and we were outside at lunch, you know, in the like outside the cafeteria space. And I don't know what got into me. It was like this rage. And I just grabbed her shirt and shoved as hard as I could. I just put all my weight into it. Just started pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing like I wasn't going to stop. And she fell backward because she wasn't expecting it. She was like, ah, you know, into one of those holly bushes. You know, the holly bushes with the really pointy edge leaves? And she got stuck in it. And she's like, and of course, all the kids are standing around going, girl fight, right? And she's laying there, this big bully, like softball player. Okay, so big girl. She's laying in there like, ah! You know, she couldn't get out. And I'm just like, you know, couldn't believe what I'd done. Well, we both, this was when they did discipline right, in my opinion. We both got taken to the principal. We were both seen by the principal, and he got the stories. He saw us one at a time. And he's like, what's your story? What's your story? And then he thought about it. He called my dad in and he said, I'm going to have to, because there was physical violence, you know, there was hands-on. He said, I'm going to have to suspend them both. But he said, but I understand what your daughter did. Like, he was decent. He understood. He said, the other girl has been spoken to. I've taken information from other students. It was when they used to do it right. And something happened to our camera, I think.
No, you're good.
Oh, so that's when they used to do it right. So I did get suspended, but I was okay with it. And my dad we left and he took me home and he said, I'm proud of you. He said, you did the right thing. That's the right thing to do. And today in that scenario, I don't know what they would do, but it wouldn't be what they did. I mean, this girl the teacher was there too when my daughter got shoved. The teacher was there. What if my daughter lost a tooth? I mean, at what point, you know, and people have asked me, why didn't you sue? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Well, it's a very complicated situation when you're in a divorced family, and that's what we were. If one of the parents is like me and is like all up in there, you know, we gotta do this, and the other one's like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to get in trouble. There'll be backlash. I'll get in trouble. This, that, the other. You can't really go it alone. it's got to be a united front with the family. And you can't have one parent who would in any way say, you know, I'm not in on this. I'm not on board with this. I just think we need to, like, you know, just move along and try to de-escalate the situation. And I was kind of in that situation where I'm a fighter and I want to go and fight these things, but I wasn't in a position to do it by myself, if that makes sense. As things wore on, as the years wore on, then I did. But this was earlier. This was before I moved her to a charter school thinking this will help. No, it didn't. It did for a year. And then after that, it got really bad. After Trump got elected, it got really bad.
It was really weird because it wasn't like Trump had anything to do with any of this shit. It was just like suddenly everybody lost their friggin' ever-loving minds. It was like, okay, I don't care if you like the man or not. His foreign policy was friggin' glorious. His economic policy was friggin' glorious. I don't care. You can say you hated the guy. Fine, hate the guy. But we had good stuff happening. Will you stop being fucking stupid? Excuse my mouth.
I have a theory, though. I have a theory about why that is. I think if you have existed in a bubble, in other words, if the mainstream media, entertainment, and education, college, and everything has been just an echo chamber for you, and just constantly saying what you already think, and you start to believe, everyone thinks like me, or at least all the good people, or whatever. You think it's a majority opinion, and you don't realize there's like a whole other half of the country that maybe doesn't agree with you. So I think for a lot of people, especially in this world, in the education world, in politics and journalism and entertainment, I think they were so insulated. They live these, insulated lives where everybody agrees with them, that it was a shock, a literal shock to their system that this could possibly happen. I don't think they even contemplated the possibility that it could happen. And, I didn't think it would happen, but most of us who have been sort of not in mainstream opinion land have at least thought to ourselves, like, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope something else happens. I hope we don't get Hillary, whatever we were hoping. Yeah. And so we have our minds a little bit open to different possibilities of how things could go. I'll admit it. I went to sleep that night expecting to wake up to President Clinton. Again.
I did too.
But when I woke up and I saw that she lost, I was like, I didn't vote for him, but I didn't vote for her either. But I was like, cool. Okay. This will be interesting.
It was the only time I had ever voted for a president that actually won the seat. So I
voted for Reagan and for his second term, so that was.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't. I think I wasn't so shocked. I was surprised, but it wasn't the kind of shock to my system, or probably to yours, that it was to these people. And I think when your whole identity is wrapped up in your political views, which for most people on the left it is, it's not just a political view for them. It's like a religion. And so when that is I'm a liberal or whatever, and they're not even liberal, they're very illiberal. But when they think of themselves as like, this is who I am, or I'm woke or whatever.
Progressive.
It's like their whole being was under assault. And so I think that got projected out onto like, the country's in danger. There's this, like, whatever I feel is everybody else, or is everything else. I feel threatened, therefore everything's threatened. And
Grade A narcissism.
Yeah, or if it's not narcissism, it's narcissistic, in the sense that these are people who probably were, like I said, if your opinion is invalidated your whole life, you're spoiled at the very minimum. So picture a toddler or a very spoiled brat who's just gotten their way all their life, and someone comes along and takes the toy away. Like the country, here's your toy is being yanked away from you very suddenly. And I think they just could not handle it. That's my theory. I have nothing to base that on other than my own gut
observation.
Feeling. Yeah, looking at who they are and stuff like that.
I think you're fairly accurate. I think there is actually evidence to say that too. I mean, just look at what they were saying about Trump leading up to the election. Yeah. Right? Like Hillary was already the anointed one.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, but that was such a delusion that only the media and a certain set of Democrats had. Like, I was a teen during the time, because I'm a little younger. I'm like mid-40s, so I was like 12 or 13 when Hillary Clinton and Tipper Gore went on the great censorious bout of, we're going to label and prevent everybody. For the children, we're going to protect them by labels and stop this and
Tipper
the music.
Gore and all that.
Yeah.
That was the time we were
Yeah.
Well, we were facing a different type of PC culture back then, which is, I think, people, especially in my generation, right? I'm 37. We remember that era, right? The Tipper Gores and the D. Snyder speech where they called him in, where we're looking at censorship that's coming, and I call it the Christian right because they were a dominant force, and I think that's a lot that was driving it. For me, it was really easy to see that we have this new dogma coming in from the illiberal left.
Right.
Well, I was involved in the Tea Party. I started screwing up in 2001 when I started a religious tolerance club in college right after 9/11. I realized the problem. I saw the problem. And I was like, we need to fix that. So I started that, and that got me put on lists. Apparently, GW really didn't like it if you didn't want people to be mad at each other. And then a few years later, the Tea Party came along, and it was like, constitutional freedom. I'm down. I went to a few rallies. I got put on another freaking list. And ever since then, it's just kind of been every time you talk about freedom, I've watched it get more and more dangerous every time you sign up for anything that's invested in American freedom and individualism, which at the beginning for the Tea Party, that was a big, big deal, the individualism and being an objectivist personally.
Oh, you too, huh? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, very much. My husband is as well. And I think it's probably common with a lot of the more secular in nature homeschoolers. A lot of us are very, very objectivist in our...
That's fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. Especially out on the West Coast.
Oh, no, on the West Coast, no.
Oh,
I don't find many objectivists. This is when I was in Texas.
That would be really a shock to me, but now you tell me it's not the case there. So. Okay.
Oh, no, I think my husband and I may be the only objectivists within like a 4-mile radius. People are pretty irrational out here.
Yeah, well, real quick, I actually want to take time to do something that we always do on the show, which is acknowledge the chat.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I've been talking to him the whole time.
What's up, Slappy Get Right, Sarah Nicholas. Apparently, that's one of your fans, Deb. Thanks for coming over. Man Squatch, Object of Hate is, well, here's another thing. We usually don't have our cameras on. We do this through Discord most of the time.
Yeah.
So, he's complaining about me playing Magic the Gathering and not participating in the stream, which I'm not actually doing, but that says that he knows a lot about me. Mason Molpa says, howdy, bigots. What's up, Dan? We got Duck Dog, Roasted Opinion, Stan Olch, Gun Fox, Brad Young, Ryan Walters, FTW Nil, Leo Prime 75, Pear to Bear, Madness.
Faithless.
Did I miss anybody?
Crystal is one of my locals.
Oh yeah, I see Val G, another person from Dead.
Yeah.
Make sure. I'm guessing you're handing out wrenches right now. This is a wrench.
Dude, I'm trying. It's crazy. It's killing me.
What are the wrenches?
Bibble says the music's too loud, so
I dialed it back. That was earlier.
The wrench of the stage is where we give everybody basically admin, right? Everybody gets the wrench, which gets past some of the YouTube censorship and like the top chat ordering.
Got it. Cool.
And it also keeps people from picking on each other in the chat too.
What is
everybody's?
Also, I was gonna say real quick, Deb, if you wouldn't mind just explaining, like, hey, you got a channel. What are you advocating for?
Sure.
I think probably half our audience knows who you are, but the other half probably doesn't.
Okay, so my channel is called The Reason We Learn, and for those who don't know about the channel at all, it's kind of a play on words. It is both literal in the sense that I talk about why we learn things, like why do we get an education in the first place? A lot of people just, plow ahead and go, well, I need to go to school and get an education, but do we ever stop and think about, but why? Okay, what are you gonna do with that? And then also, you have to learn reason. You have to learn to think. And I don't even like the term critical thinking anymore because the critical theorists have destroyed it, but you have to learn to think properly. And there really is a right way to do it. And that is something that has to be taught. Little kids are not born with that ability. And some adults, caring adults, have to guide them through that process because as your brain develops, you develop your capacity for reason. We're all born with a capacity for it, but unless we're taught, similar to like language, imagine if you were raised by wolves, you wouldn't know how to speak. Well, if you're raised by indoctrinators, you won't know how to think. And what I started to see happening years ago, actually, when I was in graduate school in 1989, 1990, I started to see some unpleasant trends, what people used to call cultural relativism. And we now, and then it went to cultural Marxism, and then it became, social justice stuff or wokeism or whatever. But we now know it as just woke or postmodern critical theory. People know some of its little pieces like critical race theory. I started seeing a long time ago, and I started seeing what was happening in the schools after I left teaching, after a very short time, after only a couple years, because I couldn't function in that environment. And I started seeing when my kids had to go, they were homeschooled for a while, then they had to go into public school, and I saw it getting worse and worse and worse. And I tried raising the alarm years ago, probably starting at about 2012, 2013, with people I knew, my own family members and so forth. And I was told, I was paranoid. It was just this one teacher. It was just this, it was just that. I said, no, this is a trend. And I tried to explain about Paulo Freire and pedagogy of the oppressed, which I was taught in grad school. I said, if I was taught in grad school, I'm pretty sure other teachers were. I knew that they were. Right. I said, this is not a good direction. So when it kind of came to a head with George Floyd, which seems kind of weird, like, well, what would that have to do with education? Well, obviously I didn't like what happened in the Trump administration, everything was going on in schools. But when the George Floyd killing happened, and I saw these black squares pop up, and I saw people starting to move like a mob, just like everyone was saying some of the same things. And it hit me. What are they going to teach the kids in school about this event, this specific event? The way they were talking about it, the way they were talking about the nation, is we're white supremacists. That was kind of a new twist. I knew that there was Black Lives Matter, but it seemed very focused initially on police brutality and things. And to be honest, I'm for police reform. Not that I was for Black Lives Matter. I didn't like Black Lives Matter. I thought that they were what they are, Marxists. But I still was kind of like, well, what happened to George Floyd was pretty horrible. So, but then when it so quickly turned into this like national thing of the whole country sucks and we need to revamp all the curriculum and we need to change how we're teaching everybody, I said, now I've got to do something. Now it can't be just, I'm talking to people I know. I have to stick my neck out there, and even if nobody listens to me, even if nobody watches, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm going to start explaining what I think is going on, and at least it'll be cathartic for me. I'll just get it out there. Maybe someone will trip over it, and it'll start a conversation. Because I felt like there were questions no one was asking. Like, why are we doing this? Is there really a problem? Who said we were racist? There are all these questions in my head. And it started, and then people started responding to it. And so here I am a year later. It's about exactly a year. I have the YouTube channel. I created a locals community because in my evolution as a content creator, I had to study. I had to look deeper into what's going on in the schools. I had to research how they're structured now versus years ago when I was a teacher. And every sort of piece of onion I peeled back, everything I looked at led me farther from reform and more towards abolition. And I wasn't too hopeful for reform to start with. Okay?
When you say abolition, what do you mean? All right.
I see the schools, as you guys have mentioned in the past, like as sort of a kind of prison, like what Michael Malice said. So kind of the kids are conscripted to be there. It's a form of slavery in that respect. It's not like slave labor, but you don't have the freedom to say no to something that's hurting you.
Michael Malice literally calls it slavery.
Yeah. So I call anything that you can't say no to that is hurting you, like it's objectively hurting you or your children. It is slavery. Like that, what else is it? It's freaking hurting you and you can't say no. Not without making other arrangements and showing government that you've made other arrangements and jumping through these hoops. And if you don't have extra income so that you can have the income stolen from you to pay for the school and pay again, it's not an easy decision. If you're a single parent, it's not an easy decision. In my case, I was literally forced by court order to put my kids in the school. I had no choice. So, it's a kind of slavery. So also abolition is a word people understand. They can relate to it. Something that was an institution in America that was objectively bad, evil,
and that forced people to do things against their will. And we dedicated ourselves to getting rid of it, and we did. It took about 35 years from the time hardcore abolition began to the end of the Civil War. And I'm playing the long game. These people played the long game for 100 years. They've enslaved American children and indoctrinated them. And here we are. How's it going?
Yeah.
How's it going with all this ignorance?
Well, something I really like about what you've like, I guess, learned, and you're not afraid to point at the Communist Party of China and the way their influence on the teachers union, and it's not what is the organization board members are member now, like school board members.
Oh, the school boards association, where they have their own little union. Yeah,
exactly.
They do.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
and
So there's been a huge, and a lot of people, kind of laugh and giggle about that shit. But you and I were brought up believing that communism was bad, and it was objective was to take this country over.
Yes, and the tragedy of it is, though, that because public schools were always the wrong thing. I mean, state-run education was always a bad idea, and it was never intended to teach kids how to think. So even back when they were teaching us that communism was bad and we shouldn't want to be communists and all that kind of stuff, they still did it in an indoctrinating way. In other words, they didn't have us sit and read John Locke and Karl Marx next to each other and say, let's compare and contrast, shall we? Which one is more likely to deliver human flourishing? They didn't do that. They just said, believe this, believe this. So now imagine there you are in your mid-20s, or you go to college, and now you're encountering, your college professor is a 60s radical, okay? Or there's just somebody there who happens to like Karl Marx, and things aren't going the way you want them to go. Your life isn't turning out exactly right. Or, you don't have as much money as somebody else who graduated with lower grades than you had. And now along comes a communist, and we know certainly in the 60s and even right after World War II, actually, there were a lot of people here just infiltrating, Soviet, KGB type people. And along comes somebody who goes, you know why your life sucks? It's capitalism. Or you know why this isn't working out for you? It's this stuff. Now, you've been told communism bad, communism bad. And they say, oh, they indoctrinated you. Did you ever hear really about what communism was? And they start telling a bunch of tall tales and stories and so forth. And you don't have core principles. You don't have anything to hold on to that you've reasoned out yourself. When you figure things out for yourself and you've compared and contrasted and you actually know who John Locke was, and you understand natural law and you understand human freedom and all that, you're resilient. Somebody tries to sell you Marx, you're going, yeah, nice try. Because you arrived at your ideas organically, like yourself. No one just told them to you. So that's kind of the tragedy, is our schools were not set up to teach us our own principles and values as Americans in a way that we could defend them against anybody who was going to try to change our minds, or that we could pass them to our children in a really meaningful, deep way. Some people did. Obviously, plenty of people did, or we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. But it wasn't universal. We had these government schools, these public schools, and still a minority of people graduated with core principles. And they probably got them outside of school. They probably got them from parents, grandparents, possibly even, some other kind of an influence, books they read. I've talked to people on my channel and I've asked them, they're younger than I am, how did you develop the ideas you have? And one guy told me, he said, I grew up in Mississippi, single mom, poor, et cetera. He said, but I noticed that, some people got rich and some people didn't. And I decided to read books written by the people who did. So I started reading books written by the people who got that way. And that led him to people like Thomas Sowell and so forth, economists and Milton Friedman and so forth. So this kid whose mom just happened to prize reading and education and took that very seriously, just took it upon himself. It was a good idea. Well, I'd like to get rich someday. I'll read books by people who got rich. And after all that reading, he arrived at these conclusions himself. But that's like a pearl in it, like in an oyster, that's, our schools were not set up to create people like that or to help people get that way. In fact, they were set up to do the opposite, to prevent you from thinking for yourself. So even when you and I were taught about communism, it wasn't in a way to make us strong. What made me strong was my grandfather.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to actually have teachers that did that, and they did get canned quite quickly after they taught us that way.
Well, in my experience,
pretty sure,
go ahead.
I said, I'm pretty sure, the lie that I was taught in school about communism, because this was post-Soviet the Soviet Union already fell. The lie I was told is that communism's a good idea in theory.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's a worse lie than just telling me communism is bad.
Right.
Well, I
That's
mean,
the one
think
they
about
always
it.
use.
It's
Like
a-
once
it-
you understand it, it's not a good idea in
it's
theory.
a beautiful dream, is what I call it, because it's on paper, it's altruism, it's everything good about
I actually
people.
don't think I'm the
It's
one
not.
oddball. I see it, everyone being equal and everybody sharing equal, and it sounds horrible to me. It sounds absolutely nauseating.
It does.
No,
I'm sorry.
It's not a good idea in theory because that's just not how reality works.
It
It's not
sounded
how
gross to
humanity
me
works.
as a kid. I was like, wait, no, mine is mine. Screw you.
Okay, but I'm also that person who thinks that like the idea of going to heaven sounds really not fun either. So
I better have a back road. That's all I'm going to say. It better have a
it's like-
holler.
If
That's
it's
all.
for eternity, you're gonna get bored after a while.
Well,
Oh, hell no, not if you give me a holler.
Well, my thing is like I don't want to go someplace and like not be with my family for a long period of time and all that. Like there's certain things that just don't appeal. And I like the idea of striving. I like the idea of things not always being perfect. And I think we now live in a time that is the proof of concept for inequality. In other words, that why inequality is actually kind of a good thing in the end, because it is our prosperity and peace and comfort, and we took care of all the real problems, right, of survival in the United States over the last at least 50 plus years. And so I think human beings like had this like weird need to create problems to conquer, to create dragons to slay. And so what I think we've got is a bunch of people who need to have created problems that aren't there. They're just not there. Like, oh my God, this so horrible inequality. I'm like, have you ever read a history book like in your life? Do you know
They're bored
anything
and
about
lazy.
anything? You are so spoiled if you think you're oppressed right now. And this week has shown us, right, in living color. Look at Afghanistan. And I'm waiting for anybody in the media. Of course, we won't see it unless it's from the independent media. Anybody to say, so about that oppression you're experiencing, college person or Antifa in Portland or whatever. Let's have a chat about the people of Afghanistan today. Don't talk to me about oppression. They're so spoiled. It makes me sick.
It's actually amazing. Everything from critical theory does not apply to any second or third world country.
Isn't that bizarre?
Post-colonial theory will possibly try to make that jump, but there's plenty of shithole countries, if I'm to be honest, that are just terrible, inequality, mostly homogenous when it comes racially,
right?
That have worse problems than America could ever dream of.
Well, it's hard to have perspective when you know nothing. So we have people who are really, really smart when it comes to, certain things. Like they're high tech that they can use and they're really good at crafting narratives and all that. But they're dumb as dirt. They're ignorant when it comes to anything about the world, how it works. And, another case in point, COVID hits and people are like, there's no toilet paper because people are hoarding. No, there's no toilet paper because supply chains, because nobody's going to the office, and there's the commercial supply chain and the residential supply chain, and everybody's at home, and the residential supply chain is overtaxed. They can't do it. And because of government regulations, we can't just shift gears and sell commercial grade toilet paper in a giant roll like this at the regular grocery store. That's
nobody has a way to
lot of
use
red
it.
tape.
Nobody has a way to use it.
No, and they don't have a way to use it, and they didn't even know it existed. These people who go to offices every day, they were still like, where's the toilet paper? And I'm like, it's in your office that you can't go to because you're locked at home. But I was talking to a very nice lady at the grocery store about this, and we were talking about toilet paper. When are you getting your next shipment? Because I wanted to be at the door at 5 a.m. or whatever. And she said, I just don't know what's going on. So I explained this problem to her, and she's like, oh.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. And this is what I'm saying is they're not stupid, they're ignorant. And so when people are talking about solving problems, I even saw these people like, well, we're going to lock down the country. It's just 2 weeks. We're going to lock down. I'm like, you got a big important job and a title. I'm pretty sure you have no idea how the world works.
Oh no, I lost it. I lost it when Operation Warp Speed was signed. I was so pissed. I was pissed for like 4 days. I was just lividly angry because I knew what was going to happen with Operation Warp Speed. I knew all this stuff was coming down the pike and that we were all looking at a problem. And when they started talking lockdowns, they said 15 days. And I said, y'all watch, it's going to be 15 months, maybe even 15 years because they just got new power and we're all screwed.
Well, that was a given too. I remember saying before they actually locked us down, when I started seeing like weird things, going on, like there were National Guard people on like overpasses for no reason, like, what is this about? And then it was like stay home flashing on the signs. And I said to my daughters, I said, they're going to lock us down. They're going to lock us down. And we're in North Carolina. And so they went home and they told their dad, Mom says they're going to lock us down. And the typical answer I would get, that's ridiculous. She's your mother. She's so, crazy person. And of course, what happened like 2 days later? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I'm a crazy person? What? What?
Yeah.
You want to take that back? So, I mean, the only good thing about all of this has been that my youngest daughter got to come home. The eldest two came out for tragic reasons, but the youngest one got to come home. And because the other two are already here and already homeschooling, and then everybody was locked down anyway, it was like, well, yeah, fine, she can stay. But the other thing that was good is so many I told you so's to somebody who really deserved them. That's all I'm gonna say.
Right?
I've predicted crap like this for so long. I'm like, I give us like 10 years. I said maybe 10 years ago. And I said, I kept talking about creeping tyranny, and I was pointing to the schools and all this kind of stuff. And I just got this like eye rolls and, oh my God, here we go. Mm-hmm. And here we are.
The Patriot Act like sealed it.
Oh,
good
please.
Lord, dude! I got put on list for protesting that one too.
Well,
okay.
And that's a Soviet, communist thing is to name something like that the Patriot Act.
Of course.
Well, and it's so fucking
that's everything.
dystopic. It's
like
so dystopic.
The Affordable Care Act just like raised my insurance
Twice what it was, yeah.
Dramatically,
unaffordable.
And now my deductible is like 3 times what it used to be.
So I mean,
Affordable Care though.
So what I'm trying to do with my channel is say that, the controls that we have still, the powers that we still have, they haven't taken from us yet. And I actually do think we need to hurry, because if we leave our kids in these schools too much longer, they're really good at organizing, and they're really good at finding legal loopholes to do things. And I'm really concerned that if they see the people exiting, but if we don't do it fast enough, if we don't exit enough people fast enough, they'll figure out a way, they'll organize a way to somehow hold our kids captive, take our kids, whatever. They'll figure something out, make homeschooling harder, illegal, whatever. But if we reach critical mass of are already out, it's a lot harder to get people back into something than to keep them in it. And so I think what I have decided is I'm out there trying to encourage in my world, education, I've been trying to encourage parents to create an alternative system. Like it doesn't have to be homeschooling. You create a micro school, a co-op, or find a church with an empty basement or an empty space and rent it out, whatever. Just find alternative systems, alternative solutions that are outside of the government's purview, and educate your kids.
Absolutely.
Give them what they need to become first and foremost well-adjusted. Okay, let's save their emotional, like their minds, so they don't become this part of this cult. And secondarily to that, let's give them real knowledge, things they can use, not just the book stuff, but also some life skills, teach them how to fix things and do things that will help them, in due course. And we have that power right now. And I'm trying to encourage people to use that power. And then what I'm hoping is that business will follow suit, like entrepreneurship will follow suit. People say, oh, look, there's now a market for supports for this. I'm going to go start something here that's also more off the government's radar. I'm going to start something myself so I don't have to require my employees to have 17,000 shots or whatever, so we can just start to create like a separate little world alongside these crazy people, because we can't beat them. Like, we literally can't like topple them or remove them. And I don't believe in elections anymore. So I feel like we have to just create our own separate thing and just do that. Like Atlantis and Atlas Shrugged. We just need to just shrug.
We do. We need to become Galt's Gulch. We really do. I've said for a long time, Common Core was the death knell. Somebody put it in the chat earlier.
Commie Core.
Yeah, Commie Core. As soon as I saw that
Core.
mathematic, being a papered and peer-reviewed astrophysicist person, I've passively detected gravity twice before I was even like 30, okay? I did that before I even finished school. I don't even have a degree, but I did that. And that tells me that I actually have a frontal lobe that I can take other information and I can use it. And that tells me that I'm actually intelligent. That's evidence I can use to rely on my own intellect. And I looked at Common Core, and I have a special needs child who already struggles with mathematics. And they're trying to teach her this new language, and it doesn't make any sense. There's no linear anything to it. There's no logic or reason. And I was done. At that point with the poor treatment my child was getting with the education and the covering up of all the attacks and everything, and the trying to force her to, submit and be friends with all these people that are hurting her. I don't know what to call that. It was forcing. It was almost like they were forcing Stockholm syndrome on my child.
Yeah.
It was very angering. And you combine those, and I was like, okay, I'm out of the system. And then I realized, taking a step back from the system, I looked at it and I went, oh my God, this is a 1940s style, like Lithuanian education program. What the hell are we doing?
I think it's I'm pretty sure that James Lindsay has something on New Discourses. It's like a short video explaining the similarities between what we're seeing and occult induction.
He does.
We have talked about that on this channel, so
we've broken the video down.
Right, and I believe it's accurate, and so what I'm telling parents is, how do you deprogram a child from a cult? In the couple hours awake, you see them when they get home. It's so because I've had pet parents tell me that, well, I'll just make it up at home. Well, I'll send them, but then, I'll tell them not to listen to the teacher. I'm like, really? You're not concerned about a mixed message to your kid?
So and then they get 9 hours, right, to indoctrinate your children, and it's like you'll spend an hour, 2 hours to try to undo it? I'm sorry.
And they're not content with that.
Right.
I covered a webinar that the Department of Education did not that long ago, and they were talking. I think it was the deputy secretary was had a bunch of people on to talk about the coming school year and what their goals were and what they wanted to do, and they want to create what they call community schools. Now, when I was coming up in the whole teaching thing, a community school meant we were going to return schools to the community, so you had your local school and there wasn't this whole weird busing thing of zone, like strange lines drawn to drive your kid 45 minutes from home to go to a school. And we were going to return to like neighborhood schools, community schools. So you'd be like right there in your neighborhood, so at least you could know the people. No, that's not what they mean. What they mean by community schools is the school will become your community. And they were talking of putting laundromats in the school. They were talking about putting a healthcare center in the school. This is what they want. In fact, one guy was saying, I think it was in Miami or no, DC, I believe it was. He said that they did that. They put a laundromat in the school because parents were saying, well, my kids don't want to come to school because their clothes are dirty and there's not a laundromat in our neighborhood, and so they're embarrassed to come to school in dirty clothes. First of all, how many kids do you know are like upset about wearing dirty clothes? I mean, I can't get my kids to get it's like
right,
and they're girls, and they're like, "What? I've worn this T-shirt. What? It's only 3 times this week." I mean,
I
can
remember when I was in junior high, I had like 2 pairs of Jinkos.
Yeah.
And I would wear them every day. I don't care how dirty they got. Like,
I mean,
those were my jeans.
I hate to say this because it's going to sound like I intended, but it didn't pass the smell test. So, I mean, so suddenly it was like, oh, but we solved their problem by putting a laundromat. And all I heard was, you solved your problem by getting kids to be more dependent on the school and coming to school. So they're lifting things away, and they're like, oh, and we're having coffee time with parents to come and tell us like what they need from the school, and they're saying they want a health center and they want this and they want that. I'm like, oh, I'm sure they'd love all kinds of things. They probably want a grocery store and all kinds of stuff to just be given to them on the taxpayer's dime. But that's not school. That's not the job of the school. Meanwhile, the kids can't read, they can't do math, but they got a laundromat. So they're trying to make the school the center of life pushing the parents and the family out of that so that the state becomes their mommy and their daddy. And forget mamas and daddies. The state becomes the stand-in for parents.
There's something that has to be. There's something that has to be said on that note, because all these things are just like, well, if we spend this money to do X, Y, and Z, the students are going to perform better. It's always for the kids, right? They're going to do better.
Never seen the results of that.
It's never happened, right? Like the expenditure per student, even adjusted for inflation, has done nothing but skyrocket over the past 50 years. But their actual proficiency levels have just been flat.
Well, not only that, once you start doing for people, once you let them know that like the government's going to take care of it, you sort of create a generation of people who take that for granted, and they don't question the morality of it or the ethics of it. So they don't even know who's really paying for it. They talk about it's the state. I've actually heard grown adults say, well, that's state money. I'm like, the state doesn't have money. They don't have money. That is not their money. They don't, yes, they print it from nothing, but it's still not theirs. It's insane.
It's easy to get, especially like lower class people, to buy into that and think that it's okay because they're not the ones paying the taxes for it. But they actually look at the results.
Sales taxes, and that's one of the most aggressive taxes there is. So they're poorly educated, that intentionally. So they don't understand the math of it. They don't really understand, when they talk about civics, they have a very basic, rudimentary understanding of how the government works. So they don't understand how laws are made right now and appropriations, and even how Congress has basically stopped doing its job, so that they do these things where they now, instead of writing a law that includes like what's going to happen and where the money should go, then instead of taking responsibility for that themselves, they just appropriate funds and hand them off to the departments, the cabinet level departments, so it's now under the executive, to decide how to spend that money. So it's like, here's a bunch of money for this and for that. And these unelected bureaucrats
get to spend our money how they see fit.
Like at the Department of Education, can just sit there and go, I'm going to do what I want. And they don't get replaced every election.
Yeah. And 90% of the money actually goes to administrative positions that are created through all these initiatives, and they're not actually funneled down to the school.
Exactly.
Are you familiar at all with like education in India?
No,
Have you heard about that at all?
Nope. Sorry.
Well, like, so in India, right, like it's a rising country where you're getting a lot of like high skilled professional work, especially in the tech sector. But it's a ridiculously poor country. And there's a lot of places where there's no public education, and very poor families are getting together and finding means to have low cost and pay for private education for their kids. And these private schools are outdoing the public schools in bigger parts of India.
You want to know why? Because the key to any successful education system is community investment. You have to have people that are invested in the community.
You have to have skin in the game.
150 years ago, the reason education was so primally effective and that everybody learned so much is, one, every mother and father was invested in their child's education because that child was going to take over and feed them when they got older. Two, so you had to be able to depend on them to be able to do the job you were already doing. And you didn't live as long, so you didn't have as long to teach them those things. And two, the teachers that you would hire to do stuff, or the people that were doing the teaching, they were invested. They knew you. They knew your kids. You all grew up together. Everybody was invested in making sure everybody had the very best. And that is something that is not happening. Most of the people I know that are teachers, they don't teach in their hometown. They never teach in their hometown. They're from across the country. They go to uni and they go file for jobs across the country, and they don't care where they end up. They just go to the best paying place that they can find. And that's that. They aren't invested in that community. They don't care about those kids. They don't know those parents. They have no reason to give 2 squirts and put in the extra time. And the union tells them they don't have to and that they have all the power.
Right.
So it's a really bad system. The most effective education system I've ever seen is we did a church-based co-op for homeschool, and we had, I think it was 16 families, and we all taught different subjects, and we had like a list of everything we wanted to teach the kids at co-op, and it was for a few hours a couple times a week. And We would all create our own lesson plans and we would go in there and do it. And it was some of the most effective education because we would usually lay the stuff out there and we would start teaching the kids and the kids would start teaching each other. And you want to know what the most amazing learning experience is and teaching experience is watching kids teach each other and learn from you at the same time. It is the most amazing and effective thing. My daughter was 2 and she still remembers the stuff she did at that age. Well, it's amazing how effective it is.
That's one of the things I'm trying to do on my channel is to get parents to ask questions they probably never thought to ask, like, why do we educate kids in groups of all the same age? What's magical about chronological age? Shouldn't we be doing it by, interests or abilities so that they can, or why wouldn't we have multi-age classrooms so that kids, as you point out, can learn from each other? The way you really know you know something is when you teach it to someone else, right? And so there are questions that people just don't really, they take it, the experts, they must know what they're doing. Yeah, they copied the Prussians. That's what they did. They copied the Prussians who wanted this regimented school, that made all the people the same, like little people widgets. And it was created, most people don't know why the public system exists. They just think, well, we've always had it, it must be good. And they don't question whether it's moral for the government, for your government in a free society, to conscript your children, that's what it is, and compel them to show up at a specific building based on zip code, and then to compel you to pay for it where you have absolutely no say in what's going on there and who the teacher is and how they hire and all of it. Like, this is America. And there are parents who still aren't even questioning the government teaching their kids everything they want to know. You don't sense a conflict of interest? Like, it's bizarre to me.
The same people that lied to us about WMDs are teaching our children, and everybody thinks it's okay.
Yeah, Deb, that leads me right into like kind of a devil's advocate position I was wanted to present to you.
Sure.
Public education is wildly popular, right? It's like
it's like a sacred cow. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like it is hard to break into.
Sure.
Like, do you think that I understand what you're advocating for, where you want people to go. Do you think politically, though, like kind of, I don't want to call it incrementalist. I'm going to call it de-incrementalist, right? By at least decentralizing the public school systems so that the communities have the most control over it. Do you think that is a politically viable strategy to get to the destination you want?
Absolutely.
I do, but I think the precursor to it is still a mass exodus. I think in order for the politicians, who are about as venal as you're going to ever find on both sides, in order for them to have the political will to take the money and put it back in the hands of the communities or the parents specifically, but then as Tema pointed out, that would then possibly fund community schools or whatever. I think in order to do that, they need to see that a large percentage of their constituents want that. And the only way they're going to see that, it's not from protests, it's not from yelling and posters and this and that, it's from actually physically removing their children, because the amount of commitment that demonstrates is pretty profound. Well, and I think they'll take it seriously.
If you look at so Alabama has a really interesting and very clever homeschooling model. What they've done is they've decided that you have to have a school that's either based in a church or a nonprofit or something, that is a place where people can gather and educate together. So
if they're requiring that, though, I'm opposed to that.
Well, I can't remember how the law works right now, but it's a really good system in the sense that it fosters people to do it on a community level. Mm-hmm. So that everybody's working together for education.
That's fine,
I like the Texas model better.
I don't like the government getting involved in that. I think we could encourage that. I'll be honest, I'm not sure we need to encourage that. Most parents will say to you they're concerned about, quote, socialization. They want their kids to have friends and social activities. They want their kids to be learning with other people. Okay, unless there's a reason not to. Okay, even I do. So I don't know that that's something we certainly need government to incentivize. And once you give government a little bit of control that way, they take it all the way. So I think that sells itself. What instead we need to do is make sure the parents have the money, and the money right now is being taken from them and their property taxes and other forms of tax. Some states put it on some of the gas tax goes towards education, some business tax. People who don't have kids are paying for it. So there's a giant pot of money. It does not take for example, let's take New York City or New York State, actually. It does not take $23,000 a year to educate a single child in an independent schooling or a homeschooling model. Not even close. It doesn't even take, if we go to the lowest, okay, the lowest state is like 9,000. It doesn't even take that much per child. I'm privately educating 3 kids in a homeschool. It's like a hybrid homeschool online model. And for 3 children, I'm not even spending 12. Okay. So, and for some people, that's still way out of reach. Okay.
I do. I've done 4 kids now, and I don't think I've ever spent more than about $300 a month.
Right. The average, just so you know, is about $350 to $400 per kid in a homeschooling model. Now, if you pool your resources, as you're describing, this is another way it kind of sells itself. Imagine how far that amount times, let's say 15 kids in one space that you could, maybe get for a song because it's part of a church, they have empty space or whatever. And now imagine, what you could get in terms of hiring a teacher or compensating a parent to be sort of the warm body in the room, supervising the parent's chosen curriculum, whatever. So point being, we can create, if the parents aren't worried about, well, the money was already taken from me, that's a big disincentive already.
Yeah.
And if they're not worried about like the government saying you're not doing it right and you need a test and you need this and you don't have the right degrees. There are some states that want you to have a college degree.
Callie, you have to be a certified teacher and pass the CBEST just to homeschool your kids. And you better have 75 hours of teaching under your belt too.
That's actually not true.
Oh, did they change it?
Well, they tried to do that. And it got overturned. Okay.
Oh, okay. So it must have been after I left.
Here's what they did instead. There are 2 models of homeschooling, and it's true in a couple other states too. There are 2 models. One is, you homeschool at home, and your kid and your kids, and you're doing it that way, and so forth. And then there's the model where if you want them to be in any kind of other setting, whether it's a co-op or a micro school or whatever, there you have to have not the certification, but you have to have a college degree. And so they kind of changed their model around, and the people at HSLDA know all the rules, but they've tried these things. But there is precedent. There is precedent that went all the way to the Supreme Court that the parents' rights don't stop at the schoolhouse door. So these states keep trying to make it onerous, and they keep bumping into reality that there's only so much they can do. But some states like Alabama, South Carolina require you to align with a learning community. And I'm telling you, it's an obstacle. I've been working with a woman the last couple of weeks, and she said it was kind of a pain. First of all, she had to pay for it to join the community. She isn't sure it's going to really be a fit for her son, but she had to do it to appease the truancy officer, who happens to be her sister. And her own sister, is calling her on the phone. We still have a say in what you're doing. Yeah. And this is South Carolina. This is the state that fired the first shot in the friggin' Civil War because of supposed states' rights. And they're like, we have control. So, I think we need to remember that the idea of publicly educating our kids, meaning in a group, sells itself. The idea of the state being in charge of it in any way, whether it's vouchers, accreditation, organizing learning communities and kind of forcing you to register with one, that's where I draw the line and I say, sorry, no. I don't want the state involved at all. Here's the only place they could potentially be involved in, only the state level, not the federal level, because the state has more latitude in terms of constitutional authority, they have more latitude. I can see a value, and I would even be willing to go along with it, for you to be able to use that money for education, to have to document, to have to put on your taxes, I spent X dollars in education, here are my receipts.
Yeah.
I can see that, okay? Because what about, the parents who just aren't going to do it? There'll be a few. But right now, as one of my guests said on my channel, people are worried about, well, what about the kids who be taught crazy things? Or what about the kids who be abused and aren't taught anything?
What about the kids that are being taught what they're being taught right now?
Exactly. And so right now, what we've got is, so for the sake of the maybe 2% that might be taught some wacky things or not taught at all, and really in the grand scheme is probably a very small amount, we've got 88 or 90% of the kids right now being indoctrinated into this postmodern cult.
To gaslight.
To what?
Gaslight,
to prevent
Stockholm
2%
syndrome.
of the kids learning some kind of wacky things that we mostly don't agree with, but it's still the United States of America. You have that right. You have the right to be wrong, as long as you don't hurt somebody else, okay? And they're hurting people. The government is hurting most kids. So I don't buy the argument anymore. And people are saying, well, what are you going to do about the kids who get abused? What are you going to do about these kids? And I'll say, and I've said before, and I'll say it again. If every parent worried about their kids, don't worry about their other people. Don't worry about my kids. I got it. That's my job. If every parent took that approach, we would already be a better country. We would already have more responsible people, more knowledgeable people, ready to deal with modern problems.
Well, it's also a ridiculous proposition, right? So they're going to say, well, what about kids that have like destitute parents that aren't going to help them? And I was like, really? All right, you hated Trump for how many years? Imagine he was in charge of educating those kids. Do you really think he's going to do any better? And they're just going to be locked up in their words. They're just going to be like, well, maybe Trump doesn't have that much to do with it. And I was like, yeah, he does. Like, he's the executive over the Department of Education. I
want to say to these people, too, I'm like, okay, go have at it. I mean, go for it. If you're so concerned, if your altruism is so strong that you want to, have some self-sacrifice to help these people, go. No one who's stopping you. Write a check, knock on doors, find an organization, start a charity. People could have forgotten about charity. They forgot that there are all kinds of nonprofits that want to help people.
It's because the government takes care of everything.
It's exactly right. So I don't buy it. I'm not buying any of this anymore. People come at me all the time with all these arguments about what about this one and what about that one, and I always say the same thing. I'm like, go for it. Yeah, you do that. No, but for you to tell me and my kids or someone else and their kids what they need to do to assuage your tender feelings about, oh, I'm worried about such and such. Your worries are not my problem. No, I don't care.
I literally do not care. Yeah.
I made t-shirts. They literally say, so what? And people were like, huh? I'm like, because that's my answer nowadays. People go, what? I'm like, so what? So
and
what? What, and
that's my
how is this my responsibility? You make a moral argument to explain how this is my personal responsibility. You who know nothing about me, you know nothing about my life, you don't know anything about my kids, you don't know about anything, our personal situation, our medical bill, you know nothing. And you want to tell me what I owe the world? But I'm the selfish one? I'm the bad guy? You literally want to pick my pocket because it makes you feel good. You've outsourced your morality to the state, but I'm the bad person. Okay.
Yeah. My neighbor's like that. She's an older Democrat. She's lifelong coastal Democrat. Very, very partisan person. And she's very upset that my 9-year-old, who is a homeschooled kid, so I've been teaching her to test and observe her environment because I'm a Socratic kind of person and I do unschooling. So, I look like such a conventional homeschooler, don't I?
Actually, most of them do look like you.
I know there's a ton of hippies that are just saying, screw the system, man. It's like a whole generation of us.
Yeah.
Gen X, we just kind of
call them Frenchy conservatives.
I'm part of that, but I'm not part of that kind of, I don't know. Right. I'm somewhere there because I have a lot of guns too. But she will state something like, I think all politicians should be hanged. And she's doing
now
it
you're
just
a murderer. Awesome.
No, I'm brainwashing my daughter into hate. Because she's a 9-year-old and she can troll.
Wow. I mean, I'll say it again, even if you were, it is the responsibility of each and every parent to educate their own child in all the tools they need to survive. And one of those tools is to deal with the fact that not everyone's going to like you. Some people are actually quite mean and might even be hateful. And my problem when it was happening to my kids is they were required to be there.
I know, and they had to pretend they loved these people.
To protect them in the literal sense. If I had, and there were plenty of days, by the way, that I just pulled them out. I was just like, we're going home, she's sick. I mean, like, my kid would go to the nurse and say, Mom, you just got to come get me because I can't take this kid anymore. And I would be like, okay. So I did all kinds of things like that, but I couldn't get her out all the time because of the law. Well, you want to talk about like gun literally to my enemy. When the judge is saying, I'm going to put you in jail for contempt if you try to homeschool your kids. What are you going to do? So,
I feel you.
But as far as the skills that they need, one of them is to be emotionally resilient. That, it's not anybody's job to protect you from hurty feelings. I'm sorry that people are going to do that. And some people suck. a lot.
Yeah.
I was bullied as a kid. And I'm not saying toughen up, Buttercup. I will say to my kid, that sucks. And I hate that happened to you. And they're an asshole and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's not true. What you need to know is that's their problem. They have a problem. Their problem is not your problem. Their opinion is not your problem. And what can we do to just get you away from it? Because that is stressful. That is, you shouldn't have to be near people who abuse you. So what can we do about that? But as far as trying to make people do things to prevent that, see, that's what we're trying to do now. It's like, we're going to prevent people being mean to you by banning words and banning things and, all this stuff. You can't do that. You're just going to make hate go underground. You're just going to make people be more secretive about how they're mean.
It's actually kind of amazing. I was watching...
Exactly. Sorry. I was disagreeing.
Well, I was watching one of your videos, and you were talking about bullying and how maybe they have a sign up that there's no bullying, but with whenever you're teaching critical theory to kids, like, you're actually teaching them to bully people if they go against that grain whatsoever. And in a lot of ways, critical theory normalizes bullying. It's one of its strategies to get people to comply. I think it's part of the strategy. Like, so you're not ever going to have a school just be like, oh, well, this person called somebody out for being white complacent and made fun of them, right? Yep. Like, they're going to go along with it if they're indoctrinating kids in this ideology. And I mean, I just find that, like, that wasn't going on when I was in school.
No, why do you think
and
we
the
have
fact
a
that it's
rash of
going on
school
now
shooters?
is crazy.
Why do you think we have so many school shooters now when we didn't 20 years ago?
There's an article that you might want to read, and it's you can Google it. It's by Brad Thompson, C. Bradley Thompson, and it might be behind a paywall. I'm not really sure, but it's called. I think it might have been on. Was this the one on Objective Standard? I'm not sure, but it's called "Our Killing Schools," and he wrote it back in, it was a while ago. I mean, it's years ago, and it hypothesizing more and more, and it seems to happen also in that window between like 8th grade and 10th grade. There's like some kind of transition there where you're not a kid, but you're not an adult, and you're male, and and the school environment is so feminized in this, like, everybody sit and be quiet, and we don't have a lot of time outside, we're gonna just sit and da-da-da. And I hate to be stereotypical, but young boys by and large need to be active. They need to do things physically to get that energy out, and they need to not be told they're defective girls.
Right?
And they don't say it explicitly, but it's between the lines. It's between the lines of so much of what goes on in school that, the girl standard is the way that behavior is supposed to be.
And I don't understand that.
I don't either. And I just think it's a real shame, because obviously not everybody's going to fit into that. Is it any wonder then that you have boys who are like suddenly trans, or you even have girls who are tomboys who suddenly feel like they need to change, right?
That's the biggest problem right now is girls that decide that they're trans at early ages, and it's being promoted by teachers. And it's almost never the case. Like, I'm sure Deb, Deborah So, right? Yeah, she's talked about this a lot, and they're like, a lot of this is like, we just need to start talking to these girls and be like, why do you think you don't want to be a girl anymore? Right? They're not really trans. There's just other issues that they're dealing with as part of their womanhood that they don't like, and they're using this excuse to be trans to avoid it. And what's even worse is that you have adults promoting it. Right? Like, they're reinforcing it, and they're congratulating them, and they're putting them on a pedestal. And I mean, God, like, the whole trans thing scares me. Like, the way that the critical theorists treat it, because almost more than critical race theory, to actual individuals, I think that could cause the most harm.
It really, they're self-mutilating, and I think that. Well, and they're also explicitly teaching the thought patterns of the depressed person. Cognitive distortion is how people think who have PTSD and depression. And Jonathan Haidt talks about it, and Greg Lukianoff, they talk about this a lot in The Coddling of the American Mind. And then there's some articles out. Greg Lukianoff has them explicitly going through what they're teaching kids, black and white thinking, and the catastrophizing, and all kinds of thought patterns that you see in people who have had real trauma. We also now know that people who have not experienced real trauma can still develop a perception of victimhood by being near people who have, and having that played up as a value. So in other words, there's social value to trauma, and then there's social value to empathy for trauma sufferers. And there are people who start to take that on and perceive that they are victims of, and nothing has actually transpired. Or they take things like, you are black, therefore you're a victim, as a given, just by base, on a skin tone. And that will be internalized because it's drummed home over and over and over again. But you are, but you are, but you are. And it's kind of like when we saw with the COVID, like the death count, the death count, the death count. Anything you see that's negative, and you hear it or you see it over and over and over and over again, it starts to become very real. I mean, all kinds of propagandists have talked about this for generations, that this is how you create narratives. And they become more real than the truth. If you try to intrude with the truth, people don't believe you. You can show them facts and show them they don't believe you. The KGB talked about that. Yuri, what's his name, who came over in the 80s and talked about it.
Uncle Yuri.
Yes, thank you. So, these are the things they're doing in our schools. I don't know that all the teachers know what they're doing, because remember, they were indoctrinated. So they're indoctrinated in college or the teachers programs, and many of them tragically are already not the sharpest tools in the shed. I'm just going to say it. It's, if they go to teacher college, very often they were going to be a major in something else, didn't work out so great. Oh, I'll go teach. Okay.
Those who can't do teach.
It's just true too often. Not always. Obviously, there's some brilliant people out there teaching, but there are plenty who went into teaching for other reasons. And then, or they're in that helping profession. They're in the kind of like, touchy-feely world. They're attracted to it. And those tend to be people who are easier to reach with this kind of a cult ideology.
Well, they're pleasure. They're pleasers.
They want to please. They're pleasers, and they hero worship very easily. And when it comes to the trans thing, what I've read in Abigail Schreier's book is that, when you get these kids in this transition phase from childhood to adulthood, which is already difficult. I mean, puberty is hard for all. It was hard for us even in Gen X, okay? It's just one of those things that's difficult, right? It's awkward. But in today's society, where again, they have not had the mental toughness. Everything has been like safetyism, right? So when you get to that point of like, here you are, you're going through this time and it's difficult already, and you aren't getting the kind of feedback from your teachers, your parents, and your community that it's supposed to be. It's like, yeah, it sucks. It's supposed to be like this, but we can get through it together. And life can be hard. When that's not the message you're getting, when it's like, we need to keep you safe, and oh my God, then you think that this is so abnormal. You must be really a boy, or I must be really a girl, or I don't want this, so I'll attach to this other thing. And it's an explanation for how awkward you feel when you're awkwardness is completely normal.
There's also a whole lot of daddy issues because there's too many single moms in the world. There's a whole lot of kids that don't have a dad at all, and there's a lot of girls that they don't know where to put that angst. Even if they have a weekend warrior dad, there's daddy issues. We have this whole like destroyed generation, and trust me, I get it. I'm divorced. I'm no better than anybody else. I was a single parent when I met my husband. He was a single parent as well. I get that we have this weird destructive thing going on, and it's tertiary, but we have too many kids growing up without two parents in the household. And I think it's causing a lot of the stuff we have because they don't know how to problem solve. They don't see people doing it as a team together either. Or they don't have extended
family. I mean,
exactly.
It goes to also to, see, I want to pick on, I mean, I was one for a while. I don't want to pick on single parents, and because there are some single parents who raise badass kids. I mean, they really do. And so but maybe they had a grandma or a grandpa or both, or they had cousins, or they had a community, or, what I tell people is the key really is what you said, skin in the game, in the community, having a real community, not a network.
Yeah.
A school's like a network, a real community, people who care about you. This is one edge that people who go to church have. You know, if you're in a church organization or you have some kind of fellowship where there's older people, younger people, there are people there that when you sort of, you know, raise the flag, you're like, I need help. There's somebody who's going to go, what can I do? What do you need?
Yeah, I miss that church culture. Culture. We don't really have it here. It's like, ugh.
But there's no need. You don't have to have it be attached to a religion. I mean, people can create these organizations. Remember, we used to have the Rotary Club. We used to have 4-H. We used to have, you know, all these things, and those can be created. It just takes a little effort. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't have the effort and the time. It's like, okay, well, you know, nothing good was easy. It's not going to be easy. I'm not sitting here blowing smoke up your, you know, I mean, it's not going to be easy, but neither is putting your kid into a state-run indoctrination center where the likelihood of them either developing a mental illness, or even just anxiety and depression is high. And then you might have shrink bills, or worse, your kid starts to hurt themselves or hurt other people, or they just hate you. They just come out and they believe, just like that teacher in Utah was talking about, thankfully she got fired, you know, that you're dumb, that you don't know anything, you're an idiot, and this is your child. This was your baby. I mean, my dad told me that once. Every time we'd see somebody, you know, was homeless or something bad on the news, he'd say, that was once somebody's baby. That was somebody's infant.
Yeah.
Once upon a time. And I can't not think that, you know, so whenever I hear these stories, well, this will be hard, that'll be hard. All I can say to people is choose your hard. None of it's going to be easy. You're raising children.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, who promised you a rose garden? And so choose your hard. Do you want the hard that you have control over?
I'll say the government back in 1967, but I'm going to leave that for another stream. It's not what really we talk about.
Of course, my husband puts an awesome quote in the chat. He goes, being a single dad would have been much easier if the state were more understanding of the motivational power of an electric cattle prod. Just saying.
Actually, before we get too far into the conversation, there's something, Deb, very specific to a video I watched of yours that I thought was an amazing example of what is happening to kids. And that is the one about the K-pop star dancing and Childish Gambino.
Yes.
And the responses that we heard.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're teaching these kids to be weak. So
totally.
I'm actually leave it to you, give like a brief explanation of what happened, and then I'll give my opinions on this.
This is crazy.
So, and first I want to say, to her credit, this was brought to me by my 13-year-old daughter who thought it was whack. So, yay, go 13-year-old. So what happened is, for those who aren't familiar with it, Childish Gambino has a song called This Is America. I'm guessing it's a controversial song because it's quite violent. It's graphically violent. It's got a kind of upbeat, poppy calypso tune to it. But at the same time, there is a pretty dark message. It's very critical of America as far as social commentary goes, talking about violence and, you know, all these kind of things. And he dances in a way in the music video that apparently, according to music critics, I don't think he has verified this, I'm not sure, but I've only read music analysis of it. He dances in a way that mimics the character Jim Crow that was created by a minstrel artist back in the 1800s. That's where we get the term Jim Crow. And it's kind of this exaggerated movement that was meant to be pejorative and mocking of Black people when it was created. So there he is. He's wearing like Confederate soldier pants, which people only identified upon very close inspection. In other words, he doesn't do anything really in your face. It's just you have to like dig and find the Easter eggs. It seems like only the lyrics are in your face and the violence. But what happened was a K-pop star from the band Stray Kids he's Australian. I guess he'd been raised in Australia, but he's Korean. He was dancing with a group of the band members, I guess, in a gymnasium somewhere. And I guess they were mimicking this song. And what's interesting, it happened some years ago. It wasn't even recent, okay? But they're about to make a comeback. And for whatever reason, there are people called antis. There are people who are sort of like anti-different bands, like they're fans of this band and not that, but whatever. And they were digging up old stuff. And they found this video of him kind of dancing to the music, and then at one point he kind of mimics the holding of a gun, you know, just like Childish Gambino did.
And he was a good dancer.
Yeah, and they're all good dancers, right? But they're
it's
doing
K-pop.
It's K-pop. So they're doing this thing and they're laughing and they're joking in Korean. I don't even know what they're saying, but the simple thing is he changed the lyrics around. He wasn't doing the lyrics. He was just doing the dancing and imitating the song. Well, in this little app called Bubble, which is an app you pay to join, and it's not inexpensive. You pay to do it. My kid got it as a birthday gift, and you so you can actually speak to the K-pop band members. You pick a few that you'd like to hear from, and maybe once or twice a week they chime in and say hi to you or whatever. But it's quite a thrill if they're a big fan. And then you follow along with their life. You see what's going on, and they give you much more private intel into what's happening. Well, some of the kids in there started posting like, I'm done with him. He's, this is racist. He had to have known what he was doing was offensive and blah, blah, blah. And my daughter says to me, Mom, she said, who killed more people, Hitler or Jim Crow? And I was like, wait, is this a serious question? She said, I think I know the answer, but just in case I'm crazy. I said, well, obviously it was Hitler, right? And I tell her how many people were lynched, and it was like, I don't know how many, in the hundreds. And so she said, okay, well, this is what's going on in this bubble, and they're talking about like he should know, and it was just like the Holocaust and blah, 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 blah. So she starts giving me screen grabs of what these kids were saying about how they couldn't follow this guy anymore. They were going to not follow the band. They were just done with him, and he needs to quit. He needs to apologize, all this stuff. And some of them were videos. One video, it was a video, but it was only voice. And there was, I think, a girl. I'm pretty sure it was a girl, and she's Asian, my daughter said. And her whole speech was like, I'm so traumatized. I can't even with this, and I'm just in shock. I don't have words. She kept saying I have no words. It was like, you have lots of words, young lady, whatever. And then she's saying these like black stays. They're called stays, the fans of this band. Black stays, you can take a break. And, they're all saying, you can take a break. We totally understand if you don't want to, and they're calling people white. Like, well, if you're defending them, then, well, you don't have a say. White people should just shut up. And it was crazy how fragile they were. Like little tiny, really like snowflakes that this guy imitated a dance. And they couldn't, I can't go on. I can't sleep.
It's kids acting like fucking Twitter.
It was ridiculous. It was utterly ridiculous.
Like when we're talking about indoctrinating kids, the way I see this is, and this is a big part of critical theory. Like we teach people that, or they're teaching kids that in order to be a good person, you need to make sure that you're outraged anytime you see anything that could possibly be a transgression against social justice. And
you have to be screaming mad,
right? And the worst part is like people like this K-pop star, they weren't equipped. Like they just apologized. They weren't equipped to just be like, that's stupid, right? Like that's dumb. It's not what we were doing. We were just dancing. That was the correct answer. But they're not equipped to do it. And it's also dangerous to do that these days because all of a sudden you can get national attention. Like this was just a little thing in a bubble. No pun intended, on Bubble.
Right. That's what my daughter said. She said, Mom, he just wanted it to end. He just wanted it to end. Because I said, he shouldn't apologize. I was like all mad. He shouldn't have apologized. And she said, Mom, he just wanted it to end. He just wanted it to end. None of us because obviously the people who were angry were thankfully in the minority. But she said when he apologized, most of the fans were more worried he'd get in trouble with his managers because he's supposed to ask permission
to play around and make jokes with his friends.
Does not supposed to. No. He's supposed to have permission, making a public statement like an apology, like I apologize. Like that would be pretty big, right? That's kind of PR. Right. And he's not supposed to do his own PR work. So apparently they were more concerned, my daughter and her friends were more concerned that he would get in trouble right before this comeback, because band members have been removed from other K-pop bands for doing things like this. They have been. And, these kids, I don't particularly approve of the way they're treated. These K-pop members, I think it's kind of exploitative. And my daughter's concerned about it too, because she genuinely cares about them.
It's not much different than the Disney stars.
It's exactly like that. So she is more worried about them, and this is just terrible the way they're being picked on. And she said they were just having fun. They were just having fun. So I'm happy that I have 3 kids whose heads are screwed on straight and they recognize, BS when they see it.
Mhm.
What concerns me is who are they going to be friends with, right? I mean,
My
it's hard.
kids.
Because
for
it's
them.
absolutely ridiculous that kids, particularly like teenagers, would look at that and they would come to that conclusion and be outraged based on nonsense. Like, it's just fun, just like you said. I mean, that's something I related to and it like hit deep down. I was like, that is the problem with our societies. People have been taught how to be offended.
Yeah.
Like
And
I grew up knowing that offense is taken, never given.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
The same.
Right.
And
like, and I realize that words can hurt
all.
you from close people or whatever. Right. Like,
Yeah.
I get that. I get that it's more complicated than that, but something I'm completely detached from, like some K-pop star doing a dance, like there's no reason I should think negatively out his intentions or tell him he wasn't thinking correctly because he was trying to have fun. He was dancing. What is more fun than dancing?
Okay, but there's a whole other aspect to this. And within Korean culture, even if he was Australian raised, he still was raised with Korean culture. And within Korean,
no idea.
Yeah, within Korean culture, racism is funny. It's okay to be racist in Korea. Because to them, it's just funny. They make fun of themselves in racist ways, and they make fun of everybody else in racist ways. So that kind of racism doesn't occur to them. Japan has the same problem.
Well, and Japan is very racist against Koreans, and China is very racist against
Japan. And,
racism in Asian culture, and we call it racism.
It's nationalism, actually.
Yeah, race. I don't know what you would, essentialism or something, differentiating like that is just, and I'm not excusing it. Please don't hear me as saying like, oh, why can't we be like that? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it is actually ironic that these kids don't realize they are being culturally ignorant when they pick on them for this stuff that while we don't like it and it doesn't fit with our values and so forth, it is in their culture. Asking them to suddenly act just like us is a kind of bigotry in a twisted way.
Yes, it is. It's very bigoted. It's very, very bigoted.
It kind of goes back to like all this falls apart when you get outside of like all of critical theory falls apart when you get outside of Western European nations.
Except that it's spreading and it's being, the Chinese are now making videos to be shown.
Oh, they don't believe it.
To our kids. No, they don't believe it. But they
just know it'll weaken our culture, and politics is downturning from culture. So, if they promote it, they can cripple our politics. But.
Right, and I see somebody in the comments was saying K-pop is garbage, but hey, if you like it, knock yourself out. I will tell you what. Initially I had a kind of like an eye roll reaction to it when my daughter started, being a fan. But it's been a tough year for our kids. It's been a really, really tough year. And there are a lot of things that could have gotten her through that wouldn't have been as healthy. Okay.
Right.
So is it the perfect situation? No, but it makes her happy. It cheers her up. She's shared some songs with me that are very poppy and upbeat and fun. And if that puts a smile on her face, so she's been like kind of secluded and, because she had some friends before all this happened and she got ghosted by some friends and that left her with some, bad feelings about kids. There were some really shitty little kids that treated her like garbage in her last year of school. And then we were all locked up and cooped up and, she couldn't go anywhere. And she's a very social, outgoing person. So it was quite a shock to her system. My older two didn't have as much trouble with it. The eldest was working, so she got to get out of the house. And the middle one is perfectly content to not be around people, more like her mama. But the youngest is very outgoing, and this was really, really hard. So for her, K-pop was an outlet, and I just realized I'm not going to be that mom who is like judging what makes my kid happy from a pop culture kind of a thing. It's not.
Oh no, it's just because his 14-year-old daughter is constantly listening to J-pop right now.
Okay, and I get that. I get that, but I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that people understand that our kids are going through a really rough time right now. And it might sound like a hypocrite because on the one hand I'm saying like, we're raising our kids to be so fragile. And then I'm saying, well, our kids are going through a rough time. But I think there's, asking your kids to be tough and resilient when it comes to like people are being mean to you. And obviously I did with my kid too, but it doesn't excuse the fact that these kids were vicious. Okay. But being locked up in a lockdown and then, being told constantly like, there's this virus and everybody's gonna, and and realizing, especially if you're bright, you know everything's changing. And then you've got me for a mom, poor kid. I mean, all my kids, they got me for a mom, and I'm not going to be the mom who's like, everything's going to be great. Everything's fine. It's all be good. And we're good. And everything's fine. This is me. I've been making videos. They're not blind and deaf. Okay. Yeah. They know how I feel about what's going on in the world and the culture. And, I try to balance it with some optimism and different things. But I feel guilty sometimes because I'm out here, saying, the sky's falling to a certain degree. And I've got 3 impressionable kids, so I do feel bad about it because they're like, thanks, Mom. Thanks. We already feel pretty bad about things, and you're telling us the future is not so bright. And so what I try to say to them is, I'm working to make it better. What I'm doing out here is not just lighting my hair on fire. If I weren't an optimistic person, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd just be circling the wagons and, cutting off everyone and saying, let's plant vegetables, let's build that chicken coop. Or whatever. But I'm out here saying these things because I believe in parents. I believe in the just common sense of the average American. I believe that people will respond when you ask the right questions. They just haven't been taught. They haven't had anyone push them to ask these questions or even think about these issues. It was just automatic and everyone did it. Go send your kids to school. But if I didn't have that belief that we could save these kids first and foremost, which then is their generation and they'll have friends and people to grow up with, and that in so doing we can save the country. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing this.
Well, see, and we use a lot of humor and snark in our house to get past that. That's why you see my husband making the comments that he is because we're just offhandedly.
Build the compound.
Yeah, build the compound. We will. Trust me, I already have enough people to do it. We own it. Saving up. But it's for my kids, what I did is I turned off the news. And I let them talk to their friends, and I said, you guys can all talk amongst yourselves. I'm not going to stop you guys from your theories or anything like that. But what I did is every day we would turn on a different of the big 3. So it was like CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. And we would look at an hour of this channel and what they were saying, an hour of this channel and what they were saying, an hour of this channel and what they were saying. And then we would go to the internet and we would look at the actual information. And when I started showing them the actual information, a lot of that anxiety went away and they were just flatly irritated with the government, period.
Right.
So,
well, that is one thing I quit doing years ago. I think I stopped watching the news on any channel with the possible exception of the debates. I did watch the debates, but I stopped watching news pretty much right after Trump was elected.
Really?
Yeah, I just didn't watch it because, to me, I have so many better things to do with my time than get that angry. I would wait until, after things had aired, and then I would kind of look at different sources to, that I handpicked to find out what was real and what was not real. So I saw clips from CNN or I saw clips from Fox, but I could not sit and have that on in my house. I don't think I would have made it through those 4 years. I would have pulled every hair out of my head. I would have been screaming. I'm that person who screams at the TV. Like my kids, and they're constantly, I do in movies too, not in the theater, but at home. I'm yelling at, don't go downstairs. What are you doing?
I do that.
My kids are like, they can't hear you, Mom. They can't hear you.
Yeah, I feel like I stay fairly plugged into the news, but I haven't watched cable news ever.
Our house was flooded and we were in the middle of remediation. We were stuck in a hotel all day. My husband was recovering from some medical maladies and he couldn't go anywhere anyway. So we didn't have anything else to really do, especially being stuck in a hotel with pretty much none of our belongings. So it was one of the few ways I could occupy the time and we could discuss what we were seeing on the TV, what we were hearing. It gave me an ability to show my kids propaganda, the buzzwords to listen for, how people talk, framing and stuff like that. And it really did remove a lot of their anxiety. Now I understand most people don't have, 10 weeks stuck in the middle of, what are y'all doing? Sorry, they all just kind of wandered in and then ran right back out. Oh, no damn clue. I love my children. I love my children. But I recognize we were safe in that. But I found that it's really helpful for my kids because it gives them the chance to be able to show their friends.
Right.
And my 14-year-old's all over Tumblr right now, which is apparently where a whole bunch of other teenagers go, especially the ones that like to poke bears and feminists. My daughter loves to go poke feminists because she's 14.
I'm so glad my kids have not discovered that.
Oh, she loves to go poke them. She's her nickname. Yeah, she's a fascinating little kid, but she has found it much less anxiety-inducing in public to fully understand what's going on because now she feels like she's from a rational, sane, flat, kind of grounded standpoint that isn't crazy pants, where she doesn't have to worry about how she feels about these things over here. She can just know that she's chosen the right path based on the information she's been given. And I want to be able to give that to everybody else. And I don't know how to provide that for anybody but my kids.
Yeah, but you're doing what's best for your kids. And like I said, in my kids' case, they just don't want to hear about it. They're trying to get on with their lives. And I think their biggest thing right now is, well, how do we make friends, and who am I going to go be friends with? And so even though I tell people all the time, like, oh, don't worry about socialization, worry about it because the schools are doing a really weird job of it, or dangerous job of it. But it is an issue. You do have to make those things. I have tried, and my eldest daughter found a dance group that she goes to, a social dance club every other Tuesday, and she loves it, and she works, so she's got her thing. But the other two, like I said, the middle one is kind of like, yeah, whatever. And the youngest just doesn't. I've tried mentioning all different kinds of things, even joining a co-op, hey, do you want to do that? No, Mom, I don't want to do it. So I think something's going on in that regard, and I can't quite figure out, in other words, it's not for lack of trying. It's that what went on in the schools and what's going on in the outside world is something that she'd just rather escape from at the moment. And so I'll just keep trying.
My Aspie's like that too. She has no interest in it. She's I don't care. I have manga. I have anime. I don't care.
So, she does well in school. I'll give her that. I mean, her schoolwork, she does a great job. So I guess I'm just trying to leave well enough alone and not push too much. Just check in every now and again. And we do things as a family. Yeah. And that's what we're going to do. But anyway, do you guys have any other other education questions or?
Okay.
I have one more thing. We usually try to go for 2 hours, so we're about done.
Okay.
There is one other video. Be clear, I have not watched your full library of videos, but I did watch a lot.
Well, that'd be hard to do. There's 200 videos.
I did watch a lot. Whatever Irate said that you were going to be on the show. One of the ones that I thought was very interesting was whenever the Parks and Rec chick was plagiarizing that Harvard commencement speech. And what I thought was also extra interesting.
He got fired, by the way.
Yay.
Did he?
He did finally get fired.
Because I was going to say, if you listen to that in a vacuum, it does not sound nefarious. Right. But when you kind of know the agenda behind it, how nefarious it actually was.
Right. That's why I did it. That's why I did the video.
Yeah. And this is something I kind of wanted to explain to our audience, and maybe you can talk about it a little bit. But what I got from that is this person was given a speech that was trying to harmlessly reduce the importance of your individual determination.
Exactly.
Trying to completely strip that from you and think that you are dependent on other people at all times, which is a recipe for failure.
Correct.
So
it feeds that whole mentality too of dependency, whether it's on the state or other people. They don't want individuals. And I spend a lot of time on my channel about that. If you go through my videos, you'll probably find half a dozen where I talk very specifically about whether it's in talking about equity or talking about individualism or whatever, where I'm trying to alert parents to the fact that they think they have an individual child. They're like, this is my child, and they're who they are, right? And most parents want that and want their kid to grow up and be their own person. And when you alert them to the fact that the state and the state schools do not want that, like explicitly don't want that. Progressives, that, particular political persuasion, that whole side doesn't want that. They want your kid to feel like they will be lost without the collective if they're not part of a group. Right. And that is really dangerous, not just for your child, but for all of us. Okay, because when you lose your individuality, or you lose that sense of self and self-ownership, you will sell yourself to the highest bidder. I mean, like, it's like the Matrix, okay?
But that's an indoctrination we've gotten since the 60s.
Yes, but it's gotten...
it's getting worse and incrementally more insane. Well, but we've always had this idea that you're maladjusted if you don't have a whole lot of friends. Well, you're absolutely not maladjusted if you don't have a whole lot of friends.
Right. But now they're literally saying individualism is bad.
Dead. I know.
That's a new thing.
Agency doesn't exist either.
Correct. What they did and what I got out of the speech and what the person was trying to say is, what is happening is that everything you're doing was dependent on somebody else.
You didn't build that.
Dependent, right? It's not that you as an individual realize that this person can help you and you're human and you have to operate in the social system where you have to work with other people. It's that wasn't important. It's that other people contributed to your success, and that is the most important thing ever.
Right. And ever notice it's always like other people and you're never part of other people?
Yeah.
Like the weirdest thing is like other people contributed to your success. Like, was I other people to someone? I mean, was that not a good thing? So what I wanted to do in that video was I wanted to break it down. First of all, the plagiarism drove me nuts. That he did it. It was so disrespectful to the students, to their families. It's not that difficult to write a graduation speech when you're supposedly the superintendent of schools. But also,
you can hire somebody to do it for you.
I just realized that, like, I was so focused on what the speech was about, I had it backwards. I thought Parks and Rec chick plagiarized it. I didn't realize that he plagiarized it from Parks and Rec chick.
He plagiarized her. Her speech was like in 2015. And he plagiarized it. And so I just took the clips. I just took clips and was side by side so you could see how he plagiarized it.
It's a good video. And, like, I understood that. But for some reason, I had it in my head that, obviously the Harvard person didn't plagiarize some fucking Hollywood personality.
No. So
I had that completely backwards.
He plagiarized her. And then his message was, you can't, it's not just... You should find a community. I mean, I'm saying that here on this channel. You should find community. You should build community. You should, because it's going to help you and your family and so forth get the education for your kids. Okay, that's not the same thing as saying you can't do it alone. You can educate your children all by yourself in your house. Yes, you can. Is that the optimal situation? It's not ideal, but you can do it.
Depends on who you are.
Well, right. It depends on who you are. It depends on your kids. And it also depends on the community you're surrounded by. There are situations where it would be ideal for you to do it alone. But if you...
Yeah, I'm there.
But he was saying to a group of high school students that their life, he was talking about life in general, not specifics of educating your kids. He's talking about you can't do life alone. And then saying things like, find a group of people, spend a lot of time with them, and remember that no idea that you have is going to be as good as the idea of the group. He's got an ass backwards. I used to joke around and say that a camel was a horse designed by committee. I mean, I'm sorry. I disagree. Look at look what's going on in the freaking country right now.
Yeah, group consensus is actually terrible.
It is terrible.
We have empirical studies to show you that group consensus does a shitty job. You can have simple problems that... Well, I say simple, right? Like, imagine you have a question, like a math problem, where maybe only 20% of people could answer it, right? But you turn it into a group consensus issue, and then you'll actually see people that got the right answer being like, well, we're in the minority, and they concede to the group.
Well, I mean, Tesla worked alone, first of all, and he worked with Edison for a little while, but even Edison, in his lab, he had groups of people that he worked with, but it wasn't group consensus. It was like one person working over here on solving this filament problem, another one working on filament, another working on filament. Who came up with the best filament? You're like, individually, let's work on it. And then he'd go around and be like, this. But it wasn't like, let's all work together and do this. And this guy was making it sound like you will not be a success unless you find a big group of friends and you spend all your time with them and you run all your ideas by them. And this whole, like, what do you think? What do you think? We already live in the, like, how many positive ratings did it get world? And
how is that not a cult? How is that not improving cult behavior, expanding on cult behavior?
Not going to help you survive. And, and
it's objectively wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's objectively wrong. And what's so funny is Hollywood knows it and maybe accidentally shows it to us in things like The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And shows it to us in, Fear the Walking Dead, Firefly. There have been plenty of times that Hollywood got it right, probably by accident. And think of how many people watch The Walking Dead, right? And you'd think it was something that would click, it's Daryl's surviving really long, and he's, he joins in groups, but he's still him. He's still Daryl.
And he doesn't back down. Yeah, he has hard line. Yeah.
Same with Carol. Carol joins in and helps people and, is all that, but she's still Carol.
And she's fucking dangerous.
So, right. And so the people, and when...
The mention of The Walking Dead, Uzi's opinion of you just tripled. So,
yeah.
Uzi's my wife.
Yeah.
Is
my husband?
Yeah, she's a huge fan.
So is my husband.
So I'm just saying, I'm sitting there watching with my husband, and we're sitting there watching this, you would think people would get it, right? And it was funny. We sat down to watch the first episode of this last little, this is, I guess, the last season or something. Yeah. And we watched it the other day, and I said, it's actually really weird watching this now after this past year. And, it's like, why? And I said, because I guess I thought the zombie apocalypse, the zombies would be dead.
Right?
I thought they'd be dead first.
Instead, they just stick pieces of fabric on their fucking faces and walk around like assholes.
Yeah, so now I'm watching.
Excuse my mouth, but I really hate
it. They didn't have to die. Who knew, right? And so anyway, but that's just something that I saw in that speech. I felt like this is how you graduate a group of zombies and you send them off to college to become zombies in college. And if you're a parent and you don't want your kid to grow up to be a zombie, then you need to get between them and these strangers who don't have your child's best interests at heart at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly it. We need to invest in our communities. Like you were saying, we need to abolish and remove the concept. I've always said the Department of Education is completely unconstitutional. It should not exist, period.
Of course.
It has no right to be there.
No.
And it's one of the most dangerous and large ones. In fact, a lot of people don't know the Department of Education has bought almost as much weaponry as the state of Texas. They have a stupid amount of shotguns and ammunition and bulletproof vests and abilities to break down doors. And they claim they need that to go repossess money and arrest people for not paying student loans.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe it was a bad idea to put the government in, make the government a bank.
Right?
Maybe Barack Obama shouldn't have done that. Maybe we shouldn't have allowed Barack Obama.
I'm 100% on in the Fed, so.
Yeah. So,
but the Department of Education is friggin' dangerous, y'all. Yeah. It's dangerous, and it's something that needs to go away.
Well, people said they hated Betsy DeVos, but you know what she said repeatedly? She said, I am trying to put myself out of a job. I would like for this department to go away. And her last act in that department was to make a website. And I have a video about it that I made right after she launched it. It was November of 2020. So I guess it was right before the election. And it showed a map of the U.S. and it was about the COVID relief money. And because she got sick and tired of hearing the news say, you're not doing anything in these schools, you're not helping them, whatever. And she's like, oh, aren't we though? So she made this website. It's beautifully done. And it's got the states and it's got all the money and where it's broken down. And you can click on a state and see how much money in grants your state got and what percentage was spent. And
where it was spent for some counties.
They hardly spent any of it. So then what happened was after Joe Biden got elected, I went within the first week. And I went back to see because they said they added money to it. I went back to see, couldn't find the site. Where did it go? And I was trying to go off it used to be right off the homepage. She had it right off the homepage. Well, the whole homepage was different now. It was like shiny, pretty pictures. Hers was very straightforward. Like, here's links and here's the money. Okay. Gone. So then I started digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and I could not freaking find it. So I went, oh, my video has the link in the description box. So I go back to my video, I click on it, there it is, still there. So then I think, all right, now I have the actual URL. I'll go look at the website for it. I found it on a subpage of the website. I click it, and I click it, and I click it, and the link does not work. So there's a second video of me going through this process and clicking on the dead link to show people that it's not working. Now, I don't know, maybe they since fixed it, but I tried it multiple times. But I still disseminated the link to other people. Like, you can go see where your money is. Don't let them tell you there's no money, because it was, at the last time I checked, was $67 billion just for elementary and secondary. So,
Yeah.
And that's just public. That's only public. The private schools don't get that. So she was so sick about this. Now, I know people have problems with her and her multi-level marketing stuff. I'm not even gonna touch that. But in terms of heading up that department, first of all, she gave men their rights back, due process on college campuses. So I thought that was appropriate. And they, of course, Biden gets elected, immediately takes that back. So
Of course.
we're back to where we were.
I know, we're back to Risson and Bereave.
It wasn't all bad. She actually didn't want the Department of Education to exist. And
No.
how often do you find a bureaucrat that's like, I would like my job to go the way of the dodo?
Correct.
I think the problem, it's
Ron Paul.
Yeah,
and Rand Paul.
yes.
But there's
Rand is like Ron Paul light, but you can talk about
he still hates
another
the
time.
Department of Education. He loathes the Department of Education. But when I've noticed a lot of your videos, you always focus, and I like the way you shift back to education and homeschooling and indoctrination. And I was listening to some of your stuff. I don't get to listen like, you know what it's like when you're educating. And I do, it's flying by the seat of my pants on the daily.
Sure.
So I don't get as much time to watch videos. Now, I was looking through your catalog, and I saw that you focus a lot on the lack of proper education for men and boys.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I have a hard time doing is finding good information to teach people about the way we learn. I have a hard time finding books or even remembering titles. Do you have a list of like resources that, because there's a lot of other parents that are just starting to homeschool right now, and they're researching it, and they're actually part of our group that are in this chat right now. Can you help me give them a list of places for the way we learn, the difference between homeschooling, unschooling, co-op schooling? Because we've used a lot of terms that are just for our circle, and I know Excel and Irate have no idea what we were talking about.
Sure. So, I mean, the first cheapest, most comprehensive stop on that list would be the HSLDA website itself, hslda.org. It is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which I highly recommend everybody join, because if, God forbid, anybody harasses you, you've got legal help there because you're a member, and it's very nominal. I think it's less than $100 a year. So, I mean, it's really not, they might have raised it, but it's not a lot of money. And they're a phone call away if you run into any problems. Plus, they have a lot of resources for members only, but a lot of their stuff is free. So even if you don't join, go to hslda.org, and in the top level, you'll see in the nav, there's kind of like getting started, and that's a good place to start. There's legal, which takes you to all the state's laws, and it's a lot easier to navigate than trying to go to your state's Department of Education. And then there's a section on special ed specifically, and what you'll find as you drill down is each section has videos. Lots of informational videos that explain a lot of things, including what you're talking about, the styles of homeschooling. Okay? Mm-hmm. So they have information in there. Another great site that I recommend to people is homeschoolmom.com. You might be familiar with it. It's a very big website.
Yes.
But has just a ton of stuff off it, but it's really well organized. And they have articles on every style of homeschooling too. There's even a separate website called unschooling.com. I think it's called
unschooling.org, if memory serves.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. It keeps like buffering, but so that you can find that. On my locals community, I maintain a resource list of things that I have either seen or tried or reviewed myself, and that's for my local supporters. I have that. But I also offer like a quick hit research thread. So like if you're a supporter and you have a research question, like I'm trying to find blah blah blah, can you help me? I'll get back to you in 24 hours because you're a supporter. I'll go do the research and get back to you. So I have little things that I personally offer, and I did it through locals. I was trying initially through a website, and I was going to just charge people like consulting services, small, not expensive, but I realized this isn't going to reach enough people. I want to help more people. So I use locals, so the amount they're contributing is really tiny, but I can reach a lot more people. So
I see Timma right now being like, locals.com, Deb FILLMAN.
I'm going to go to our YouTube page.
It's the reasonwelearn.locals.com.
Okay, the reason we learn.
The reasonwelearn.locals.com. And so basically, but as far as how people learn, I'm a big fan of the book, The Well-Trained Mind. And it is somewhat classical in nature, but it does have a lot of information about how we learn baked in there. There's another book called, I think it's called Homeschool Year by Year, which talks about kind of what the basic things are that kids, generally speaking, ought to be learning year by year. But how we learn is something that, I would encourage parents to do some research on child development, read some Piaget if you want, if you're interested in that, read some Vygotsky, read some of the theorists who talked about how people learn, and see what feels right to you. Because remember, they're theorists. Most people teaching today are a little Piaget, a little Vygotsky. Vygotsky was a guy who talked about something called the zone of proximal development. What that means is that we all have a range at whatever age we're at, when we're learning, where if we're pushed the right way, if we're exposed to information, in a way that's stimulating to us or interesting to us, we can reach farther. We can go farther than what we would ordinarily be developmentally ready for. And I'm not talking about things like sexual talk. I'm talking about things like how much math you can do or how much, reading you can do. Okay, there's this little zone where you can go farther than you would naturally go all by yourself with the right teaching. That was his theory of why teaching helps, why the right kind of instruction can help, which some people who are unschoolers or self-directed learning people reject because they want the kid to steer everything themselves. I tend to agree with it. I've seen kids go farther than you could ever imagine they could go with the right teaching, with the right person guiding them. Okay. There's a group out in California right now who swears up and down they can get kids who kids who have an aptitude for math. They can get them to calculus by 8th grade. Not every single kid, but kid who already is good at math, already has an aptitude for math, already interested in math, follow their program, and they say they can get the kid to calculus by 8th grade. There's no reason they can't.
I can speak to that. Like, math was something that always came easy to me. Mm-hmm. This is tangential. I know we're about to wrap up, but I feel like especially the public education system, everybody focuses on how bad they are of treating the people that are at the bottom of the curve. They're extra bad, especially these days, about teaching kids that are ahead of the curve. In fact, all I've learned is like I got to go to gifted programs and things like that. They've just cut all the funding for anything like that. Even higher education, college credit programs, they just keep getting cut.
Yes, STEM programs are just getting underfunded and underfunded.
I've made a couple of videos that where I get pretty heated about that. The only way you can achieve equity, it's kind of like if you've got a lawn and you want all your blades of grass to be the same height, you're not going to get it by planting the right grass fertilizer and all this kind of stuff. You can only get the grass the right height by cutting it. So what they're doing, or all equal height, what they're doing is they're cutting all the tall poppies. If he's talking about gifted, we call them tall poppies. The kids who are, profoundly gifted, especially, I consider to be special needs in the literal sense that they have they need extra. You can't get the proper education for a child who is gifted in a public school, and it causes all kinds of problems. It is
a lot of gifted kids end up with drug problems because they don't have anything else to do.
Holy shit! I was just getting ready to say that. Like, I didn't have that issue. But because I was in the gifted programs, like, they were a lot of my friends,
But you had to be a perfectly
at least
behaved kid to get into those.
One of the people that I was friends with through high school and I kept contact with after I got out, like through college or whatever, died when he was 24 from a heroin overdose.
Yeah, and I had a bunch of friends.
He was
like that
genius.
too.
Like he was a really smart dude, but
well, it's
like something failed him. Like maybe it's hard to say, but you just think like somebody
Maybe he was
smart.
just a junkie, man. You know,
Some people are born with an addictive personality, and it's something they're going to battle, and if they don't know how to.
People, especially, I have the same issue. Like I have an addictive personality.
It's very difficult to be. It's very difficult to see things others don't see.
It is difficult
process things, and we need to. As teachers, we need to, educators, as parents, we need to recognize that more. We need to recognize that, and I can't tell you how many people told me, for example, that my eldest daughter, who went into the 3rd grade reading it, I mean, she could have been reading at college level, but that's not appropriate, right? The material, and they put her in charge of like tutoring the other kids. They're like, oh, you help them, but it's not fair to her. Like,
when does she get to learn?
She should have been given something else to do. And, and the answer I always got was, well, she'll be fine. She'll be fine. She's fine. Well, she's smart. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. I'm like, she's bored out of her skull and her time is being wasted. She's not fine. She's very unhappy. Kids know when their time is being wasted. And they also know, even if they can't articulate it for you, they know that childhood is short. For every kid who was eager to grow up and be a grown-up, there's also a piece of them that knows that this time is short and it's taken from them. They go to school and it's like gone. And that's what I also want to tell parents is you're not just running away from the bad schools and the terrible indoctrination. You're giving your children a gift. You're going to something. You're bringing them into a world that is going to be so much richer and so much better and so much healthier for them. Even if all you do is read books and watch Looney Tunes, it's a far sight better than what they've got in that school. And if you really nurture them in that respect and nurture their creativity and surround them with proper stimulation, like really good books and good experiences and take them out in the world and show them how real people live and real people work for a living and things like that, their curiosity, they're going to want to learn. It's a rare kid that doesn't go, how do you do that? Well, I want to learn how to do that. And look at every little kid, little kid. They want to learn everything. It's school that kills that. It crushes that. It tells them there's no point. If there's one series I'd like to recommend before we leave, if there's one little series of my videos, and it is deeper and it is a little longer, but you can listen. You don't need to watch them. So in other words, I wish they were podcasts because you could just listen to them in the car or something. I did a series on Ayn Rand's The Comprachicos. It's an essay she wrote in 1970. And what I did was I read it and I paused periodically to contextualize it for today's audience and today's schools. So you can understand not only how prescient this woman was, how brilliant she was, like, oh my God, this is so like on point.
She may have been one of the most brilliant people to ever be alive, period. She's scary.
Yeah. But also so that you can really deeply appreciate the damage that gets done to our children's minds in this progressive school model. And that's just the one thing I'll leave you with. It's one of the things I'm most proud of. And I think it's really well worth listening to. That one, and the only other one would be Jason Littlefield's interview about social emotional learning. That is vitally important for every parent with a kid in public school to watch. So
I don't even have kids, but I'm going to take your advice. I want to watch this.
Yeah, I think you'll find it interesting.
So I will. I know you're going to talk, but 30 minutes ago, Deb was like, is there anything else we need to do? And it's been 30 minutes. So let's let Deb go. Thank you a ton for joining.
I do this to everybody. That's why it's like Deb doesn't shut up.
If it wasn't you, it would be me.
We could go on for 4 hours if we wanted to, but I'm not going to bother you with more conversations that you have a lot to say with. So, or we're not going to bother you. So we're going to wrap this stream up. Deb, thanks a lot for joining. I know,
you're very welcome.
Funny enough, Atima and Irate were the people that went after you. I didn't know you very well. And when I found out that you were going to be in the show, I watched a lot of your videos. And yeah, like I really feel like, especially on education, like I'm 100% aligned. which is why I'm gonna bother you on like Twitter or something to watch these Michael Malice videos, because you're gonna be like, yes, that is my guy.
You're not the first person. I just haven't gotten around to it. Like, you're
He's
not
amazing.
the first person recently who's, as soon as
Trust
I came
me,
out as an abolitionist, they're like, do you know Michael Malice?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna be your guy. You're just gonna be like, fuck yeah, that guy.
He's going to be your favorite anarchist. He's everybody's favorite anarchist. Because
My
he's
husband was
absolutely...
just saying, I think it was yesterday or today, he goes, you know, the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking anarchy. Yeah.
Well, it's just self-rule. That's all that anarchy means, is self-rule.
Yep.
It means you raise you.
Philosophically, yeah, I've been an anarcho-capitalist for like 10 years, so...
like my whole life. Like, before it had a name.
Yeah.
Before I knew it had a name, actually. So...
Yeah. I mean, you know, my dad used to jokingly say I was slightly to the, he would say I was slightly to the right of Attila the Hun. I never understood what that meant. And I'm like, I'm not right. What are you talking about? And
no, that would be me.
This is when I was like 15. Okay. So, I mean, I wasn't even old. But
what?
I think it was because I just kept...
Slightly to the right of Attila, you actually want to fucking drop people off the ocean?
I just was kind of like, this is dumb. Why are they doing this? You know, I mean, I just always had that kind of like, this makes no sense to me. Why are we doing this? And of course, you know, even though my dad was not like a left winger or anything, he was just kind of like, well, you need government for this, not the other. And I'm like, they suck. But then there I am sitting in the back seat of the car, and you know, not then, but earlier in the 70s, with my thighs like stuck to the seat in the heat, waiting for the gas and the gas line. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
God, polyester bell-bottom pants.
And I was like, do we have to wait in the gas line for the next 3 hours? Yes, we do. We need a gallon of gas. I mean, that's in my memory.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah, government's awesome. Yeah. Not.
Carter administration. Awesome.
That was it. That soured me, and I was like 10 when he was elected. So
holy Christ.
That's all I needed. Grew up in the Carter administration. You're like, yep, government, not for me.
Yep.
Not interested.
Bill Clinton did it for me.
I will shut up now. Sorry.
All right. Well, all right. So what I'll do is we'll go ahead and shut this part off, and then I'll exit and join you guys on the other side. How about that? All right. So say goodbye, everybody, and we'll see you in a minute.
I will, but that's a long story.
Say it again.
Excel's never going to have his camera on again, but I will, because I have plans. So.
That's right. Cool.
Smoochy poochy, little boochies.
All right, fam, that's Irate Prostate. Is like we were saying, Friday night we'll be doing the cream stream, of course. Saturday, I don't know what we're going to do on XD, but I'm sure that we'll be talking about that. And on that note, this is Irate saying I'm OUT. Y'all have a great week until Friday, and we'll see you then.